jump right into Postmates products and processes, I'd like to just take a step back and briefly review the software development process as a whole. Most companies, especially larger ones or those with more of a corporate culture, tend to have a process that looks like this. It starts with gathering and recording product requirements and designs. After that, coding takes place coding takes place in the development and implementation phase to create a functional product. And once coding is done, testing can begin. This can be internal or external or both at the same time to report and fix issues, and no new features are introduced during this phase. Then when the product is finally complete, or at least deemed deliverable, it gets released out into the wild. Finally, the engineers continue with any follow-up, maintenance, and updates. The one-directional arrow here indicates that this is a sequential methodology, or a waterfall, with few, if any, opportunities to return to a previous phase, jump ahead to the next phase without completing the current one, or providing feedback. And we'll return to this process later for review.
So before we get into that more specifically, I'll explain kind of the business ecosystem that we have at Postmates right now. So Postmates operates in a three-sided marketplace. We have the fleet, the seller, and the buyers. As you can probably tell, each market has an intimate relationship with the other two, as changes to one can affect the economics of the others. It's basic supply and demand. The seller and the fleet markets create supply, and the buyer app generates demand. So if we were to take a holistic approach to our overall ecosystem, we have to find a way to surface supply of the sellers to increase and maintain the demand of the buyers while ensuring smooth delivery between the two with an effective usage of our fleet. We also need to find a way to measure this progress and to ensure that we are achieving what it is that we want to achieve. So what is the metric by which we should measure our success? We ended up settling on the goal of growing the number of users in each side of the market. This was a metric that would scale This is the metric that would scale proportionally across all markets. If there are more buyers, there are more couriers in action and greater activity for the merchants. This goal was broken down into two measurable metrics: to onboard new users, meaning make it as easy as possible for new users to convert, and to keep existing users engaged, meaning encourage them to keep using our platform. These were the metrics that we had in mind when building the products that we decided to build in each organization.
So first up is onboarding new users. Some of many ways that we aim to onboard new couriers to the Postmates Fleet app are making sign-up available on multiple platforms. So for example, users can sign up using the mobile apps, which are available on both the App Store and the Play Store, or they can sign up using web and then eventually jump onto the mobile apps to complete their sign-up process. Either way, sign-up is laid out with very clear steps, with very limited information asked for upfront. For example, the very first form that the users are required to submit asks for nothing more than their first name and last name, and that way they're not overwhelmed with having to provide too much information all at once. Another feature of sign up is the ability to log off or close the app and then return to it at a later date on that same step. This is especially useful for things like ID verification, where users need to go retrieve their ID, which they may not initially have available when they start sign up. Another objective that we aim for is low activation time. So typically, automated profile photo approvals take only 2 minutes, and background checks take 5. This, along with the ability to do pre-ordered, prepaid deliveries, allow couriers to essentially start delivering immediately, without having to wait for their physical Postmates card to come in the mail. Otherwise, they might give up or join a competing app or service. Finally, there's in-app education. So with in-app education, couriers are able to go through a mock delivery so they know what to expect thank you. So they know what to expect when they're doing deliveries. Additional tutorials also walk couriers through how to check out their earning details, which include promotions, wait time, and distance. And it can actually get complicated unless you have the visual in front of you or unless you have a very clear understanding of all the different variables that come into play. That's not all, though. In addition to these 2 tutorials, we also built in-app education in such a way that we can add more tutorials at a later date with ease. And more. Now on to the buyer side, which we approach slightly differently. Buyer functionality is available through the mobile apps and website, meaning buyers can also place orders through their website, whereas the couriers or fleet cannot deliver using only web. One feature of the buyer app is group ordering, so users can start an order and share a link with others. A use case for this might be if you're hanging out with a group of friends or colleagues and you want to put in a boba order, which can get really complicated really quickly. So in this example, one person can start the order, share the link with everyone else, and everyone can add their own order in without the first person being like, do you want tapioca? Do you want jelly? How much sugar do you want? Do you want ice? Definitely reduces user error. Another feature that we built on the buyer app is Postmates Party. Unlike group ordering, Postmates Party allows buyers to jump onto another user's order, even if you don't even know who that person is. And the benefit of this, especially for new users or solo users of the platform, is there's no delivery fees and no blitz pricing, even if it's a busy time. And more. The TLDR to all this is there's low barriers to entry for both apps, and we provide information and incentives up front to reduce user uncertainty and costs.
So when it comes to engaging existing users, on the Fleet app, the features that we've implemented focus on creating tools to reduce user errors from the couriers and optimize their time spent on the app for maximum profit. A good example of this are heat map polygons. Heat map polygons are areas on the map that will show couriers what parts of the map have high demand, and they can go there and maximize their time spent. Delivery details and package count are examples of organizational tools that we've implemented on the Fleet app that help Postmates see the delivery details that will kind of show you what it is you can expect when you're picking up an order. So for example, this is helpful for vehicles with limited space like scooters or bicycles. You open the app and you see that the order you're about to pick up is 17 pizza boxes and 4 drinks, and you're on a bicycle, you're probably going to want to decline that order. Package count also helps couriers know what it is that they have to deliver at the destination that they arrive at. So it'll tell you things like you have 4 drinks, 3 side dishes, and 2 plates they have to deliver at this order, and they can see that, and they don't have to think about keeping that information in their head and making sure that they get the order right when they arrive. So pre-tipping is not something that we actually implemented on the Fleet app, but it's something that we implemented on the Buyer app, where a user, upon ordering the order, can choose how much to tip their courier beforehand, so that when the courier receives the order, they also, upon completion of the order, immediately get their tip. The other flow is upon completion of the delivery, the buyer will see a modal pop-up on their app that will tell them how much would you like to tip, and this can be days or weeks from the time of the initial delivery. This kind of ensures that Fleet gets paid out more faster, and it's more efficient, and it's actually an option that a lot of our buyers use. So features that we've implemented on the Buyer app are less UI specific, but a little bit more technical on the back end. A good example of this is redesigning the feed algorithm so that the app will surface a greater variety of places to buyers. This kind of ties back into the earlier concept of increasing the supply and the variety of supply that you're showing to your market, so that demand will also hopefully increase. Another example is passwordless login. This makes it easier for users to sign into their account. No more messy, I forgot my 18-character gibberish password that I wrote down on a piece of paper and lost 3 weeks ago, and I have to do forgot password every time. Instead, you can just log into the app, put your phone number in, we'll send you a 4-digit code to your phone, and you can log in with that, and it's much faster. Quick Reorder is a component that we introduced in the feed, where it's a place group that has the merchant that you have ordered from recently, and when you click into the merchant, it deep links into the most recent cart that you had ordered from, so your most recent order is there. I'll explain a little bit more later about why we chose to implement this specific feature, but the overall point of this was hopefully to reduce the barrier of entry, so less clicks for users to order their complicated boba orders or Postmates or Chipotle orders where people know exactly what they want, the same bowl every time. It just makes things easier and more efficient to do.
Now let's take a moment to revisit that development process that I displayed earlier in the presentation. This is what I showed. It might also be a little more what you might be used to working with. However, at Postmates, we prefer a different way of approaching it. These processes might look the same on a high level, but as you can see, we also adopt a constant feedback loop. Some concrete examples of providing feedback within the company are having individual or team discussions, reporting features or improvements or bugs, prioritizing pull request reviews, or commenting on requests for change or specs. And some ways for external users to provide feedback are messaging through the app, Twitter, or Reddit, believe it or not. Those are just a few of our online resources. Participating in focus groups, being beta testers, and joining the Fleet Advisory Board. Sometimes stakeholders easily agree on the feedback, so the steps are very clear to make the necessary changes. However, it's also common for there to be disagreements, which can create a healthy tension between the individuals or teams involved. In the long run, this can lead to a more effective and productive environment. The teams at Postmates are relatively small, so this tension that I'm talking about and what we do with it can really make an impact. And let's not forget the other change here, measuring outcomes. Building and delivering products is all well and good, but without analyzing and understanding the impact it makes on end users and the company, it's very difficult to plan for what's next and determine how we can make our current state better.
So if we were to bring it all together, I mentioned earlier that I would talk a little bit more about the reason why we decided to create this quick reorder feature. I've worked for some time on reworking the feed algorithm that we use to surface merchants on the buyer app. We had this initial hypothesis that surfacing better places and helping discovery of new places would not only attract new users, but it would continue to engage existing users. So over time, we revamped the algorithm to choose places that had higher delivery rating and was favorited by more users, and used the user's order history to surface places that were similar to what the user had previously ordered from. If the user did not have previous orders, we surfaced tried and true places which were popular across the board with our users. So we defined an experiment that would roll this new algorithm out to a percentage of users in some of our larger markets, and we let the experiment sit for a couple weeks. We did several experiments of this kind, so if you've noticed something different with your app compared to your friends, maybe we're A/B testing on you. But we tweaked the algorithm to favor different properties and different properties of the places and did multiple iterations of this experiment. But as time passed, we started noticing surprisingly that there was no change in user conversion. It didn't increase, but it also didn't really decrease. So this was kind of interesting. We were very surprised to see this happen. So we decided to go back to the drawing board and test out our initial hypothesis that surfacing new places would attract demand. Surprise, it really wasn't. According to our data, it turns out that a good chunk of our conversion came from searches, which means people would go on the app, they would search for what they want, and then they would order from there. Either that or they would order from places they had already ordered from before. Given this, we realized that it wasn't about increasing, well, in this specific instance, it wasn't really about increasing supply and the variety of supply to increase demand, but it was just more to find out what the demand is and create features that would kind of feed into that demand and just make it easier for users to get what they want. That's how we ended up with Quick Reorder. Users can see their orders that they've done in the past, quickly reorder what they've done, and after running some queries against those place groups and their success rates, Quick Reorder is one of our most popular and successful place groups.
So after 20 minutes of us talking, I'm about to summarize our presentation in 30 seconds. So if you only take one thing away from this, take this. Lessons learned, takeaways. Experiment, 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 and analyze the resulting data and feedback from users. Experiments are not always successful, such as exposing new and innovative places. We are creatures of habit. A lot of our users like to order from the same places over and over again. And that's okay. Sometimes there's just not enough user conversion, so we need to turn the experiments off and revert back to the older way of doing things or try a different way that may prove more successful. In addition to that, we should not be afraid of removing code that's no longer useful to us. Marie Kondo, your code. Not all changes make a big impact. So even if the experiments do work out, they might not make a big impact. But that's also okay. Just because they're not making a big impact doesn't mean they're not useful. So sometimes smaller changes can build incrementally to create a bigger impact. And finally, we are never done growing. We want to keep improving the user experience by innovating and releasing new designs and features. So here are some links for you to explore and learn more about the company and the work we do. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and insight into building products at Postmates. Thank you.